Okay, hi there. How are we? It is another conversation, Inspire and Be Inspired. Today's title was slightly controversial. I was asking a question: was the Sands ever better than the Southport Weekender? Purposely sensationalising the conversation to try and get a few people to join us. And this gentleman I'm talking to now is going to agree that it could never really possibly be any better, but we'll find out. Paul Stuart, how are you, mate?
Hi, Andy. Hi, everyone.
Good. Let me begin by saying to you, Paul, and to everyone else that is going to be joining us live and, of course, watching the recording, I've had some technical issues over the last few days. My hard drives have gone down on me, so some of my graphics might not be working. Some of the settings may not be right. So if anybody sees anything that looks or sounds awry, then do let me know. I'm saying all this, Paul. It's probably just me and you chatting. Nobody can probably hear us or see us, but it looks like everything's going fine to YouTube anyway. Yeah. So it's going to be archived there. So thank you for giving me your time.
So I've got a bit of practice in.
Wicked. Well, thank you for giving me your time. My aim is to get to know a little bit more about yourself. We would have met at the Sands at the Southport Weekender, but there is a hell of a lot to yourself and your history that goes way back before then. You are a very well respected and learned music man, so I think it will be great to share some of your wisdom and some of your stories with the crew. We can do that, right?
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, I can see Dylan is with us nice and early inside the chat. So everything is working. Dylan, do feel free to give it a share, mate, and let's get all of the crew inside. Okay, then, Paul. So we should begin to find out the year you were born and where you're from.
Well, I was born in September 1964, so that makes me coming up for 59 this year.
Wow.
So
you look good on it. So, you look good on it, mate. I tell you, you do look good on it.
It's the life I've led.
Do you feel it at times?
Sometimes, yeah. But no. So I was born and raised in Hemel Hempstead, which is probably 25 miles northwest of central London. Watford is sort of 10 miles to the south of us, and Luton is 10 miles to the north. So right sort of back bang in the middle of that.
Okay, and Hemel Hempstead.
Place to grow up. It's
what is it renowned for? Because I mean, if you Luton's famous for its car plant, for example. What's Hemel? Yeah. What's Hemel got?
Probably the most famous thing is the Magic Roundabout. It's a roundabout in the centre of town. You can go round it both ways. So it's very confusing for new drivers going around. That's probably the most famous thing to come out of Hemel Hempstead. The most famous thing.
Aside from yourself.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so let me say, as you know, I always like to make this as interactive as possible. So I'll say hi to Front Back House. Remind me what your actual name is. Front Back House, please. And Nikki Cole says, good evening, Andy and Paul. So, yeah, so Hemel Hempstead, 54. Paint me a picture. Why am I saying 54? 64.
64.
paint me a picture of Hemel Hempstead. You know, say let's skip forward to when you're just about to start senior school, and
Hemel Hempstead is one of the new towns that sprung up around London after the Second World War. So it moved a lot of older folk out of the London housing, so to get sort of build London up again. So. There's quite a few from my dad grew up in Stonebridge Park, North London. So there was quite a few of his pals that all moved out to Hemel as well. So like parents' evening and stuff. That's Johnny, what's his name? I used to go to school with him. So it was quite a big sort of community of old Londoners out in Hemel. So yeah, we just had a great upbringing, fantastic mum and dad. Didn't have much money, like a lot of people back then. But we always had holidays. We never had the latest sports gear. It's like Woolworths football kit and Woolworths four-stripe trainers and stuff like that. But yeah, we done all right. We had a very happy childhood. So
okay, and forgive me.
Thank my mum and dad for that.
While you were giving us that, forgive me. Sometimes I'm focusing. Did you mention if you had a brother or sister? I don't think you did.
Yeah, I've got one brother, Kevin. He's 15 months younger than me. He's still in Hemel Hempstead as well. He's married and got 2 kids.
Okay.
As is my daughter Emily as well.
So no one to steal their clothes, no one to get inspired by their music. So when did music become part of your life?
Well, probably growing up, as a lot of people, the radio was always on in the kitchen. There was no telly back then. It was 3 channels, and they only started sort of late afternoon when the school's finishing anyway. So the radio was always on. Probably Radio 2 on a Sunday afternoon, Stu Potts' favourites and stuff like that. And then in 1973, I think Capital Radio started, one of the local pop stations from London. Nothing really sort of took me. And then it's probably about 1977, Mum and Dad bought one of these Toshiba music centres, or whatever they call it. So it had a record player on the top with a tape deck next to it.
A horizontal one? Or a
it's like the controllers are now, sort of thing.
Yeah,
they had like a tape deck on one side, and then nice metal front with a radio dial and all that on it. And then my dad, he bought Earth, Wind and Fire All in All album. That was his first pick. He was an old mod anyway, from like when he was in London. He used to go to Ronnie Scott's, and he loved sort of Dave Brubeck and people like that. And he bought this Earth, Wind and Fire album. He started playing it constantly. I think he must have heard Fantasy. That was a single at the time on the radio. So that sort of piqued his interest, and he bought the Earth, Wind and Fire album. And then he started going back and buying like their older catalogue as well. So it's the Spirit album from the year previous, and then the Gratitude live album. And then that was just mind-blowing to hear that. He used to put it on a Sunday morning. We'd be sitting there reading the papers or, messing around in the garden. He just heard, they're presented Earth, Wind and Fire, and all the band kicked in, and he's like, whoa. So that was really the start of that sort of lit the flame sort of thing.
I can see the passion when you're just recounting that tale. I can see the passion in your face when you're reliving it.
Oh, it's just brilliant, yeah. And I've got all these old albums up there now, so it's they're being well looked after. Wonderful.
Well, that's where the inspiration comes from. Thank you, Danny, for just reminding me. I shan't forget again. I probably will, but I'll make a note to not forget. Just chatting inside the chat. Also, PAX just up the road. I spent a couple of hours putting the world to rights with PAX here on the Costa Blanca. So nice to have you with us. Nice to have you with us, brother. Okay, then. So Earth, Wind and Fire. A big organisation, bigger than a band, right? And then as we would have rolled on, the spectacle of seeing those would have blown you away as well.
Oh, big time, yeah. Well, I went with my dad to see him live at Wembley Arena. I think it was 1981. And it was just incredible. He was doing all the magic tricks and like levitating, and some of the band members was disappearing off stage and then coming out over like the pyramid at the back and all that. And my dad was just standing there in awe. He just absolutely loved it. Mm-hmm. So, but obviously with Earth, Wind and Fire, and then started buying albums by like The War and the Isley Brothers and things like that, or some of the old Motown compilation albums. So he was just sort of adding to his collection along the way. And then I suppose I was getting me like pocket money, paper rounds and stuff like that, buying little 7-inches. I think probably the first one I bought was like Tavares or something like that, Who Done It or something like that. It was one of the first I bought. And then just met lads at school, lads we played football with on a Sunday, and they was into the same sort of music as well. And like obviously disco was sort of big around then, so we heard it a lot on the radio anyway. Their older siblings was into it. So then we found out about sort of Robbie Vincent on Radio London on a Saturday lunchtime, and Greg Edwards on Capital as well. So that's just sort of really snowballed then, and it just sort of really sort of got into it.
Mm-hmm. So this is coming into the back end of the 70s, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I ask a question that may seem a little bit ignorant, but being from Birmingham and not really knowing the scene, what it was like down there, because it was predominantly black music you were listening to, what was the culture like in Hemel Hempstead? Was it mixed? Was it unmixed, or was there a wide array of cultures?
Yeah. probably our school with about 1,500 kids in there. We probably had 10 or a dozen West Indians, or West Indian parentage. A few Asians started coming as well, Asian parentage as well, around that time. But yeah, it wasn't really,
Did you meet any resistance at all with the music that you enjoyed? Was it, looked down on, that it was lesser music, or everyone was on it?
From school, there was probably 8 or 10 of us in a little sort of clique who was into the music. But then you had like the jam and all that two-tone stuff was going on at the time, the mod stuff, and then Madness and UB40. So, and then they were a very mixed group. So it was just, I didn't really.
Well, that surprises me. That surprises me that you say that at school, because I have memories of that at my school, and you've got like 6 years on me. So it must have been the back end of you, literally, when you were leaving school, that all that was really blowing up.
Yeah, I left in 81, so it's probably about 79, 80, like Madness and a Jam and stuff like that.
Yeah. Because I've got memories. I've got memories probably around about 81, 82. But then I also have memories, as everyone does, of Boy George being on top of the pops and everyone talking about it the next day at school. That era. Yeah. Very, very vivid memories of that. A varied, a wide array of music in the charts. So let's talk then about when you would have started going out, and apart from hearing the music on the radio, where you would have first started hearing it out publicly, and where you had an inkling of you wanted to share that music, or does that come long into the future?
That's a bit later on, I suppose. Sort of leaving school, I left school in sort of June 81, and then out of our sort of group of a dozen or so, a couple of the girls, they knew some other guys, older guys, probably 4 or 5 years older than us, that was going to Caister and going out clubbing and going to the Royalty in Southgate and all that on the scene. And they was going to Caister, and had me and my mate booked to go to, I think it was number 8 that was in October 81. So she arranged for us to go on the coach and meet all them guys and that. So that was our first. I probably went to a gig called Hustlers in Hemel Hempstead. That was in probably early 1981. That was just in the top room of a pub. It's quite a famous club. There was like case of DJs like Brother Louis, Louis Martin, his name was, and Mike Allen. They're still around. And that was my first sort of taste of hearing music sort of loud in a club. And then obviously around Hemel there was like the famous sort of disco pubs as it was them days. So we started going there on a Friday night, and he was pretty good DJ. He's like picked up some of the imports and stuff like that, as well as all the latest British releases that was coming out, all like the soul and funk stuff. So that was really good. And obviously then 1981 October, we went to Caister, and that just absolutely blew my mind. Seeing all them, there's probably 3,500, 4,000 people, Froggy sound system in the main room, sweat dripping off the ceilings, massive big stacks of speakers, everyone in shorts, and it was just so hot. And the music was just, this was me. It was absolutely fantastic. And I was October, so I just turned 17, I think it was.
So it's the perfect storm of coming of age again, sort of thing, getting to travel, being around all the women, the amazing music, and drinking. Maybe an ignorant question, but it's never come up in conversation. Was there a sort of like an underground scene at Caister of not people drinking, if you know what I'm saying? I don't want to be too specific on the conversation.
No, it was quite a bit sort of beery sort of crowd. Okay, it did have a reputation like that, but then I think a lot of places did. Then it's different sort of culture than it is now.
So in the northern soul scene, for example, people were known for staying up all night on the whatevers. There was none of that at Caister going on.
No, not that I know of any of my sort of people I knew of. Maybe a bit later on, I suppose, but not that I knew of anyway.
Well, like I say, for a youngster from Birmingham of not really ever experiencing it years down the line, I'm starting to hear more and more about K-Star. I'm starting to hear more and more about these DJs. So I'm trying to bring that conversation to widen my own knowledge, understanding of it. So again, it may seem ignorant, but I'm still just learning about it.
It's great to pass it on. There are a few sort of books and articles about it, but it is quite an unknown story really about that K-Star scene. It was an absolutely huge scene from the late 70s through to sort of mid 80s. So it was absolutely fantastic scene, and it was, the music played was equal to anything that was being played in New York. And you listen to some of the recordings of K-Star and some of the DJs, and you see they're playing it before they was playing it in New York. Stuff like Funk Masters, Love Money, and that they was playing that on our scene months before it ever got to New York.
Well, I have seen some. Sorry, carry on.
It was like the latest US imports was on that radio. Like I say, Greg Edwards was playing it that Friday night, Robbie Vincent on the Saturday morning. Everything that came in the shop that week was getting played. It was a very new music scene, and that's really stuck with me throughout my life. It's always looking for the new stuff, new music and stuff. So
I have been researching, watching videos, listening to podcasts, some of the wonderful scenes from K-Star. There are snippets of it on YouTube. And in a couple of weeks' time, I'm going to be talking to one of Froggy's very good friends and finding out a little bit more about it all. So you mentioned about new music. Did you see that as a badge of honor? Did you see it as sort of like one-upmanship amongst your friends who could get the things? Was there a sort of a challenge between you who could get the best music?
I suppose there's quite a small sort of group of us. There was a couple of record shops in Hemel, and then we discovered there's a guy on the market, or just on Hemel Market on a Friday afternoon. He stocked all the latest imports and import albums and stuff, and it was actually fantastic. We couldn't afford much, but like an import 12 back then was probably £3.25, £3.50, and an import album was like £6.50, I think, and. For a guy, for a lad on pocket money who's getting £2 a week, or pocket money, or his paper round money, it was a bit too much. So the imports sort of come a bit later, but he was able to get a lot more choice of the UK releases and stuff. So we did, some weeks are saved up. Like some of the Alphonse Moves On was a By All Means album that came out in early '81, and that was like the album to have. So I saved up for a couple of weeks and bought that. And some of the other guys bought something else, and then we sort of taped it and sort of passed it around for each other and that. So I was a bit naughty like, but
I was going to say I've got the image in my head of the cassette with the skull and crossbones on it. Home taping is killing music. If only they knew back then, they'd have been happy for people to tape them, right? After the way the way that it went. So K-Star, that was the beginning of it then. So that was every 6 months, like how the...
That was every 6 months, March and October. So once I met all the older sort of guys, they took me under their wing, and then I brought all the other school friends in, and we all sort of, if they was doing a coach trip somewhere, we all bundled on and we was on the coach with them. We was going to places like the Gold Mine when... down in Canvey Island with Chris Hill and Jeff Young. That was an absolutely seminal club, probably one of the most famous clubs on the scene at the time. Was 06 going to see Froggy and people down in Southend.
Tell me about the anticipation of going to the Gold Mine. What it was about it? Was it just the fact that, wow, we're going to hear this amazing music, we're going to have a great time? Paint me a picture of when you knew
Chris Hill and Jeff Young from K-Star anyway, and obviously phenomenal DJs with fantastic taste, and then just going to see them on their home turf. I mean, the first time we went down, I went down with my mate. We had a chat a couple of weeks before. It was like the Gold Mine anniversary. 10th anniversary in October 1982 it was. And every Saturday in August they was doing a different theme. So like the first one was jazz. Second one was
amazing.
Well, that was
something just fell off. What was on your wall behind you? A clock or something? It just fell off the wall.
No, I think it was the round things we got from Tenerife.
Okay.
I think it was that, I think.
Oh, brilliant.
I'm there for 6 months and it has to wait till now to fall down. That's my luck.
Wonderful. Okay, so you were saying about Chris and Jeff.
So, yeah, I think the first Saturday was jazz, the second Saturday was street funk, the third one was Philly, I think, and the fourth one was Goldmine Classic. So me and my mates said, right, we're going to go down to the first one. So we ended up getting the train to Southend on the Friday night because we went to see Froggy at 06. Come out of there at 2:00. We didn't have a clue what we was going to do, how to get round to the gold mine. It was probably 15 mile away. So we just sort of stuck our thumbs out at the end of the car park coming out of 06, and we ended up getting a lift all the way to Canvey Island. So walked the last mile or so, and we arrived at the gold mine at 4:00 in the morning. So we just sat outside and then waited till like the pub upstairs opened up at 11:30, I think it was. So we just sat out at the front door waiting for it to open. And then the guys arrived to open up the pub. I said, what are you doing here? So we're waiting for the gold mine to open. He said, well,
so this is 11:00 in the morning.
Yeah, we've been there since 4:00 in the morning. we just got a little bag of us. We knew we was going to 06 and we was going to the gold mine, but anything other than that, there was no plan whatsoever.
Wicked. So what were you drinking all day, or just get a bit of food in here, or?
No, but pubs wasn't open all day then. So I opened up at 11:30 and it shut at 2:30. This is 1982, so pubs all day opening in pubs didn't start till 84 or 85, I think. Something like that. So yeah, the pub shut at 2:30. So we went back outside and sat by the front door.
Forgive me if you said, what time of year was this?
This was August.
Okay, so it wasn't like the bleakest of winters down on the East Coast.
No, it was a lovely day. It was because where the gold mine was, you had you had the road, and then you had the sea defences and a wall, and then it was the beach.
Okay.
Whatever beach it was pretty muddy, like it was Canvey Island, obviously. But so yeah, they was just sat outside there till we come to open up at night. And then so we was getting sort of word around by then. Obviously, two guys have been here since 4:30. So we was first in the queue and got in and that. And then halfway through the night, Chris Hill called us up on stage. Said, "These two lunatics have been here since 4:30." And he gave us like gold mine anniversary T-shirts and stuff like that. And then we got a mention in Blues and Soul.
Wow.
Like in the next edition about 2 weeks later.
Brilliant. This first I'm getting wind of this. That's a brilliant story. So infamous without playing any music.
Oh no, yeah. It's just, and I was so I was 18, and my mate was 21, I think it was. So we didn't have a clue. So we knew where we wanted to go, and just got a bag, and that was it.
The thing is, I keep saying it's a ridiculous thing to say. It isn't. It was a different 18 back then as well, wasn't it? It's not an 18 now.
Yeah. Oh, big time, yeah. It was just fun. We just sat there and chatted. I mean, I even had a little radio so we listened to Robbie Vincent and stuff like that. And it's just very innocent, I suppose. And we just didn't have a clue. We just went.
I can just imagine a reporter coming down and sticking a microphone. These kids have been in. So there was no looking back. So what was your weekly clubbing other than every 6 months? What were you doing every weekend?
Well, probably Hemel Hempstead always had a really good scene. So there was always guys in Hemel that done soul nights and that. So once Hustlers finished in probably 82. Ralph T done a thing in Watford on a Friday night. So me and my ex-wife used to go there on a Friday night. Or there was a disco pub in Hemel, so we went there. Saturday nights we was away going somewhere. Mm-hmm. Sunday there was always a soul night in Hemel, so it was either the Midland Hotel, the Whip and Collar. The Whip and Collar was really the big one at the time. About 1983, we started going to the Bull in Royston. We found out about that, so we started going up to Bull in Royston. Tuesday nights, I think, was the Black Horse in Leighton Buzzard. There was soul nights there, Bob Cosby and Gavin Page. So it was a pretty busy week. There was always something going on.
And was it the venues where the events were held? Because you're talking about sort of like the rise of the wine bar era. Was everyone wearing the big shoulder pads, or was it a different? What was the fashion? Did you have that mix and blend of the different crowds in there, or was that just mainly in your ritzy kind of clubs? And then
it was more in the ritzy sort of clubs. Most of the gigs I'm talking about, they was in pub gigs, and that was it. Sound system went in, and the guy played for a couple of hours, done the talking on the mic and stuff like that, and that was it. But they pulled in, the Hemel gigs pulled in, people from Watford, Luton, St Albans as well, Harrow. I first met Ket Shah. He used to come over from Harrow. That was early 80s, I think it was. So, so there's always something going on. And it was pretty, you had your Weekender T-shirt or a soul T-shirt or a band you just see T-shirt. So it wasn't very sort of fashionable. Or,
But that was your uniform. That's how you would spot people walking down the street. You give them a little bit of a nod.
Big time. The dressing up sort of come slightly more sort of mid 80s when we started going into London and stuff like that.
To where, sorry?
I suppose. What was that?
Where did you started dressing up when you used to go where?
It's probably sort of more mid 80s when we started going into London and stuff like that. Sort of, fashions, the soul scene was sort of dying out, I suppose, a bit. And we started going into London a bit more. We was going to the Special Branch and places like that. Some of the soul dudes in London and things. And the music was changing as well. Like hip hop was started getting played at Special Branch and places like that. And even on the soul scene, and that's probably what caused the split in the end. It was like some of the older DJs they wanted to keep it soul, but then there's some of the young guns like obviously Pete Tong, Jeff Young, Froggy, and that they started playing like the hip hop and rap stuff that was a bit too much for the old guard sort of thing. So that's what sort of started splitting the scene. The old guard started playing more older stuff that was more soul. A lot of the new productions was more electronic and stuff like that, and it just wasn't soul enough for them, I suppose. It's a bit, they wanted that more traditional sound.
Why do you think people got so stubborn with regards to moving forward? Why do you think that happens? Do people maybe you can't speak for them, but is it a case of they're scared of moving on and not being relevant anymore, or is it a case of, well, that's not our music, that's not what we're about? What's your opinion on that?
Probably it's a bit too forward, I suppose, for them. It just didn't sound like the stuff they were used to. Even though some of the old the hip hop records from 84, 85 was using old soul records or James Brown records and stuff like that, but it just had a rap on top of it, but they just couldn't get with it. So that was the split in the scene basically, and they started playing older music and things like that. So whereas Pete Tong, Jeff Young, Froggy, they was playing the hip hop, and Go-Go was big at the time in the mid 80s, and then 85 house started. So it was a bit of a split around then.
Okay, that's interesting to hear, because up north there would have been a slightly different angle on the same story. So it's great to get that perspective. So there's a lot of, so much of the story that we won't capture in this conversation. Let me just say, you've had Jane and Baz saying good evening. Also, Pax says,
hi, Jane. Hi, Barrett.
Mick Foster says hi, and Jane Wright was laughing when the disc fell off the wall. And Danny also got a bit of a chuckle. And Jeff Jefferson joins us from Birmingham, who will remember the early 80s with fun memories, as we all do. Wow, what of it we can remember. Okay, so where, as I say, impossible to capture all of the story. By this time, has there been any hints of you putting on a pair of headphones?
Probably late whip and collar, sort of 83, 84. One of the guys, we because we had quite a big sort of crowd of us that was going to Caister and all the clubs, and they used to have little parties and that in flats. And there was older guys that had flats and stuff, so they used to put on parties. And I built up a little collection, so take my records around. They had decks set up and your little what was the mixer at the time? The one you got either got your Tandy mixer,
realistic.
That's the one.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my first sort of taste of playing on, on a little mixer and two turntables.
And how was your beat matching?
Awful. That come later when I've got my Technics, my trusty SL1200s. I've still got today.
Wow.
I bought one in 1984, and then I paid that off, and then 6 months later I went and got another one. And one of the guys was selling his old realistic mixer, so I had my little setup, and that was it. So that was great, and it was all like a little, stereo, the big stereos that used to be during the day, and that had a lot of phono, so that went into the back of the thing. So the stereo on a shelf above me where the decks were, so it all come through that. So it's quite a rudimentary setup, but it worked, and it got me practicing.
Froggy didn't need to worry about competition.
No, not at all. No, not till later.
So you were brought up, schooled, if you were listening to the soul music and the people hosting on the microphone. Did you ever have the balls to do that yourself?
Not until a lot later. I don't think I've got the confidence. I don't like my speaking voice. It's quite sort of flat, and it doesn't sort of portray emotion. When you listen to Robbie Vincent and Greg Edwards and that, and there's a personality there behind it. And you grow up listening to that, and it's just you think, I'm never going to be like them guys. But it was listening to Robbie Vincent, and Froggy done a mix. It was probably late 1980, and he used to do a monthly mix on Robbie Vincent, and that just blew my head off. The way he put it all together, it's just sort of a funk record into a sort of jazz record. But it was all, on the beat and everything. It was quite, mixed. It was absolutely brilliant, and that just really blew my head off. And that really piqued my interest in sort of playing on decks and stuff like that as well. That was a real big thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, playing on two little turntables and at parties, and not until I got my decks, my Technics, and that was things were started happening then. I thought, well, this is a bit of me. This is
with the big rubber mat that went on the turntable. Probably slip mat at the time.
Yeah, I know. I've still got the original slip mat from Spin-Offs.
Wow, nearly 40 years old. That is.
Yeah, Fulham Palace Road. If I remember rightly, it was 275 quid. If I remember rightly, that was in 1984, I think it was. So that was 275 quid, and then your needle and cartridge was another 20 odd quid, I think. So it's probably about 300 quid for the deck and setup and that. So that was 84. That was.
That's a passion. Well, you've got a brilliant memory for dates and occasions. So that's really good to know that you can pinpoint it exactly. So we had got up until 85, 86, the onset of the house movement. When I think of, I was going to Prestatyn weekend around, I think it was 87, and I remember it was all, hip hop and soul, and wherever you do the pyramids in the main room, everyone was up on top of each other's shoulders. And then there was starting to creep the house in ever so slightly. That's my first memory of it. And then over the subsequent years, or the subsequent every 6 months, the next thing you know, everyone's wearing their baggy tops and dancing. Yeah. And then we were balls deep, as they say. So what's your series of events around about that time?
First time I heard a house record, that was a case, so that was Froggy as well. They used to do like broadcasts. For the site, it's like a radio caster. So all the DJs on the site done a radio, on the radio caster, And at the later events, I suppose they got the technology. They was broadcasting live from the main room. So we used to take up our stereos and that, take up a big wad of cassette tapes, put them in, and just take loads of the shows and that. And that was a big part of education as well, because some of the DJs played a lot of older music and stuff. So that was a big education. So put it in, and then we was out in the main room, and Froggy played. I think it was Cameo, She's Strange. So that would be about 85, something like that. And you can hear this beat. He was trying to shoehorn this beat in. And obviously the Cameo is about 108 BPM. And it was found out later on, it was JM Silk Music is the Key, which is 118. So he was really trying to shoehorn it in. And it was like, geez. And so I've just remembered that. And got back, listened to the tape, and the end of the tape just was catching that mix, so you can hear this boom, 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 and that really sort of piqued my interest. So our local record shop was Bluebird Records in Luton at the time. So next time I was over there, so any idea what this is? And I played on the tape. Yep, here he is. Blah blah blah. DJ International, and that was my first house record. That was November 1985.
I hear Bluebird mentioned a lot. Who was the person behind the counter there?
That was Andy and Steve. I'm friends with Steve on Facebook. They started up Bluebird. That was probably about 83, 84 as an offshoot of the Luton, of the Edgware branch. I think they had one in Edgware, South London, and Luton, I think, at the time. And they had the record label going as well, Bluebird Records. And then around that time, I think about 85, 86, they moved it on to one of the guys who worked in the shop, and it turned into Soul Sense, I think it was. Okay. So that was our go-to shop for quite a few sort of years as well. Mm-hmm. And they got to know me, and it was probably a little bit later on. April 86. I don't know if you remember the Street magazine. It was part of the Street Sounds.
I'm thinking. I remember Empire. Street Sounds, obviously. Yeah. Yeah,
they had a magazine called The Street, and I remember reading in there, and there was 2 records on DJ International, and I thought, that's a label from JM Silk, and one was Fingers Inc. Mystery of Love, and the other one was Donny the It. So next time I was in, I just asked, have you got one of any of these? And he played me Fingers of Mystery of Love, and it was like, wow, this is fantastic. And then a couple of weeks later, it was, I think, Farley Jack Master Funk arrived on Underground, and then Adonis, No Way Back. Mm-hmm. And it was just, the trickle was turned into a flood by then. Yeah. And it was, I was still going a bit of hip hop and some of the old soul and all that, but it was...
you were hooked. Well, that's my memory of the press starting around that time, yeah. So when you said the Farley Jack Master, you talking about Love Can't Turn Around, or was there a different...
It was, Love Can't Turn Around, and Steve Still Curly, Jack Your Body. Mm-hmm. That came on Underground. That was probably that was going around for a year or so before it got the British release.
Do you remember being Mr. Encyclopedia? When was Jack in the Opera House, kind of? Was that around a little bit later on?
That was 87, I think. Okay. I've still got it in the... It helps. I've always done it. When I first started collecting records, I got a loose leaf binder. Wow. So every record I've ever bought, I wrote in these loose leaf binders. Got a section for 7s, a section for 12s, and a section for albums. And it's got the date on it.
Effing nerd. Well, thank the Lord that you are such a big nerd. How back, when we all started DJing, I'm sure it was the same for everyone. The size of your collection was seen as a badge of honor. As you get older, it's probably less so. But I'm sure do you still have all of your collection? Was there ever a time where you had to let some go?
I weed stuff out every now and again. And just if I'm not going to play it again, I'll get rid of it and sell it on.
But you've never batch sold loads of them, or
no.
So how many? That just brings up a picture of my small collection, I'm sure, in comparison to you. What kind of number of records have you got?
It's probably about 5,000. Mm-hmm. So you can see some in the background there. So that goes on to here, and around to here as well. And I've got some under my decks here as well. So,
and the pieces of paper in there, what is that? No, what is that showing us?
Oh, right, that's just dividers so I can find things easier.
How is it catalogued?
Like producers or record labels. So Masters of Work's got a whole section, but then I've subsectioned that off into Vega Records or Masters of Work major label releases or whatever. It's like, it just helps.
Brilliant. Okay, a little start.
All we sold albums in A to Z. Mm-hmm. Like import stuff's all together in mostly record label stuff or by year, which is a big help as well. I can remember years and stuff like that. And so it just makes it easier to find. It was a lockdown task. It was all, I used to work in a paper mill. So there was a guy on a guillotine. So I said, can you make me stuff this size? So he made me a big wad. And that was lockdown when we was off work for, 4 or 5 months. So I just went through most of it and got it all done. So it's
fair play.
And the little dot on it is it means I've done all that section onto Discogs.
Okay.
So just loading everything on Discogs.
For what purpose? To eventually sell it, or just to make a public note of it?
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, one day. Mm-hmm. Yeah, one day I'll have to get rid of it, I suppose. And I'll have to probably live off the proceeds, I think. The pension's not going to be that good, so I'm going to probably have to live off this lot.
Lovely,
so
lovely.
Big help.
I'm sure there'll be people there with their hard-earned cash ready. Okay, so I kind of took you off the timeline. So, you know, the house movement, mid to late 80s, and you had said that you started playing at a few places. The momentum, because by all through this, you've always held down a full-time job, right? You've never been seen as like a full-time DJ.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's just a passion. I'm very grateful to get asked, and even now I'm still grateful to get asked. Probably didn't really do a lot of things. Mostly little sort of parties between us and little warm-ups at places. Until even all through the 90s, I didn't really do that much. I suppose it wasn't until the 2000s, early 2000s. I suppose my name started getting about. You know, all the message boards started coming into fruition and started putting my mixes on there. And I suppose that sort of put my name about a bit. And you know, he's a good DJ, or you know, he knows his stuff. And you know, because I used to do my regular house mixes once a month, and then just do little soul things every now and again, and you know, sort of, you know, you can do a bit of everything, I suppose. So that was good. So yeah, it wasn't really until that sort of turned up that I started getting, you know, regular work, and I'm still grateful to do it. And
where was before you know, things really went big for you? Where would have been some of your favourite places to go, and first of all to party, and then that you would have been fortunate enough to play at? Because we haven't really talked about the 90s at all. So going through the 90s, what were some of the highlights, would you say?
The 90s. Most of my sort of old soulmates, they sort of dropped off the scene. So by the sort of late 80s, there was probably only 2 or 3 of us left. I'd say we was going to the special branch, dues in London, the dues at the zoos, and they was great days, and you know, warehouse parties, and then the big thing was Trip when that started. That was mid 1988, and it all really went mental then. So we was just going to lots of parties around then in London mostly, and then. Probably a story. We was going to play Delirium before that. Was going as well. We went a few times with Delirium. That was one of the only places you heard sort of house in any sort of length of. We used to go to dues at the zoos, and it was a real mix of music in the main room. Let's play some hip hop stuff, 3 or 4 house tracks in a row, and back into something else. And you know, it was a real, you know, Rare Groove was still massive in London at the time, so it was a real sort of mix of music. But Delirium at Astoria. To hear it on that sort of sound system, and so that would be 87. always remember hearing Ralphie Rosario there, and used to hold me so tight, and Liz Torres and that. And it was a big old theatre. Obviously, I don't know if you ever went there. The top half still had all the seating, and the tables had little sort of lights on, but the bottom end was just filled out, and it was just a dance floor. Mm-hmm. And it was just a huge old club, and it was just amazing. And I just loved that place. Just the atmosphere in there. And Nicky Holloway's nights, they used to get from the balcony, it used to be like these white sheeting just to for the light, for all the lasers and that going off. And it was just amazing. And we just kept on going there. That was our big thing. Nicky Holloway's things was Trip, and then he done, I think it's Made on Earth, and then Sin. And that took us up to about sort of 1989. And then it started turning into all the hardcore sort of, I think it was Rage FM took it over on a Saturday night. Mm-hmm. And just some of the guys I was knocking around with there, and they loved all that. So I started going there as well.
Oh, really? So you never had a face mask on and you dungarees?
Oh, no. No. I was probably about 5 or 6 years older than everyone else anyway. So, story of my life.
I was going to say, poor Stuart with a dummy and white gloves. Nice. Oh, no. Let me say good evening to Mark Randall, who joins us. Easy fella.
How you doing, Mark? My partner on Starpoint.
There you go. All right, so into the 90s, you had a dabble of that, but then it got a little bit too noisy, right?
Oh, yeah. It was, we've done all the hardcore stuff, and then even some of the techno stuff. We loved that. We went to Ibiza in 1982, and we went to Space, and that was just next level techno.
92,
yeah. So we got there at like 6 o'clock in the morning. We were in our little mopeds, and straight we didn't bother going out the night before, just over into Space, and straight in the main room. And it was just the music player. It was just the club was just pristine. It was just white. It even had a smell to it. It was just, I could still remember that smell. It was just like some of the music we played was all the R&S stuff at the time. That was just brilliant. But he sort of moved back, and I wasn't getting away from the soul and the house and stuff. But then coming back.
When you were going over there, were you then getting fully involved in it, or did you get lost in the scene for a little bit, so to speak?
No, not really. No, because I was married at the time anyway, so okay. It's just I was very very respectful. I didn't do anything like that, so. Okay. No, I was, So
it's still all about the music then.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wicked. Well, that's I envious of those early memories of Ibiza. It would have been 3 or 4 years until I got to experience it, and then it was a completely different Ibiza, of course, wasn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The first time we went to Cafe Del Mar was 1986, I think it was. Like the special branch done the first holiday to Ibiza. So the Milk Bar was open that year, Cafe Del Mar, and they organised some like little nights at places out in the country and stuff. And they had the Milk Bar was a base, and they had their own little base in the West End. It was probably a couple of hundred went over. So it was a great little scene, and it was all the special branch DJs, Charles Peterson, and it was just a great little scene. I loved it. And that was the first time we went to Cafe Del Mar, and that was the only thing on that strip at the time.
Mm-hmm. Literally just sitting on the rocks.
Just bottle of beers from the local supermarket, sat on the rocks and listened to the music.
There's a million stories about the debauchery over the next few years that would have gone there, and in the building in the building above. I've heard firsthand, and I've heard on other podcasts. So we're getting into the 90s then, and carrying on. Like I say, I'm happy for you to continue just really loved it.
So I was obviously with Southport. My first Southport was 1991. My mate Dean, my best pal Dean, who I met in Ibiza in 1984. he said, "Oh, you got to come to this weekender at Southport." But it was just, we was going to, like, in case the finishes 85, 86. And then I think it was Barry Island, I think. And then you mentioned Prestatyn. We went to Bognor, then Barry Island, and then it went out to Prestatyn. I don't think we'd done the Prestatyn one. I think Nicky Holloway done a couple of other weekends. We was going to the Bournemouth weekenders and stuff like that as well with Bob Masters and all them guys. So it was just too much other things to do when Southport started. So it was a few years before I got to get up to Southport. So that was 1991. And most of my old mates from Hamilwood stopped going out and stuff. So I was going up to see my mate Dean. He lived in Rotherham, so just south of Sheffield. So maybe once a month I was going up there. We was going out to like Love to Be, place like that, Back to Basics, and Hard Times started off as well. So we was going there. So it was only, I wasn't going out that much. But then I was obviously married and just got a new house and stuff like that. But still dabbling and still buying records and still getting out and about a bit. From in touch with everyone.
Love to Be, Hard to Find, Back to Basics. Clearly, unlike the American front, as you always have been, your sound was definitely then focused purely on that, rather than you could have gone the other way and start. Once you saying that, mid-90s, pretty much all of the clubs played decent-ish music.
Yeah. People like Trouble was playing 3 or 4 gigs a night all around the country and that. It was 8 o'clock in London, off to somewhere, and then back to London to play Bobby and Steve's. That's my big regret. I didn't get out in London in the 90s. None of my mates was going out, so I missed Bobby and Steve's nights. I missed the Loft and things like that. Mm-hmm. I was doing shift work anyway back then, so I couldn't really get out midweek anyway. But it's a big regret that none of my mates was into it anymore. So I was going up north. We went to Cream, I think, a couple of times on the Friday night. We used to do once a month. We used to do all nighter on a Friday night. Mm-hmm. So we went there a couple of times. So it was all dabbling. Still involved, but not getting out as much as. Used to, but still going to Southport at the time. That was twice a year still. That was fantastic. So I was doing my mixes and stuff and handing tapes out.
Were you quite active? Were you quite active in wanting to get would you have tried to get a slot at Hard Times? Would you have tried to get a gig at,
I didn't really know any of the guys anyway. I was just going out and having a rare old time. So that was it for me. I never
just a
thought
tape,
to take it any further.
A tape for the journey in the car. That was
that was it. Right? Yeah, that was about it. So, but I've been sending. Well, I met my mate Dean in Ibiza in 1984, and then we started swapping tapes, and that was it. So I've always done a monthly mix pretty much, and sent them up. He sent stuff down, and then. Someone said, can you send me a tape? So it just sort of grew and grew. One time I was sending out about 20 or 30 tapes a month. It was costing me a fortune. So I had to knock that on the air. I was glad when all the internet started, I could get involved with that and put tapes, mixes online, and people could download them. That saved me a fortune.
Should have stuck them in the shops.
Spend on records.
Should have stuck them in the shops and earned yourself some dough. Apparently that's what everyone was doing. Allegedly. Okay, so I guess we should speak then about how eventually Southport is beginning to be like the leading force in our scene for our music.
Big time.
How did it all come about that you suddenly decided that you wanted to do something over the road in the pub?
Well, we always used to go up on a Thursday night anyway, and there wasn't much happening. There was a couple of lads used to do the place at Toad Hall, which is a bit further along the road.
Okay.
And then when that shut down, they started doing things in the actual Sands itself.
Okay, so I think I just want to say probably a redundant point. So we're talking about the Southport Weekender at Pontins in Minehead. Was it Butlins or Pontins?
No, it's Pontins at Southport from...
Pontins at Southport on the original Southport site, and directly opposite the gates where you used to go to drive in, there was a pub called the Sands. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So yeah.
So there was a couple of guys just brought their records up and done a thing on a Thursday night in the Sands. It was only on the pub sound system and that, and then a couple of other guys got involved, people we knew, and then someone else got involved, and our mate, he said, "Oh, I'm going to organise it a bit better. We're going to get a sound system in and all this." And we're like, okay, yeah, we'll be there with you. And it never happened, so we ended up playing a pub system again. And then my mate Richard Francis, he said to me, "Do you fancy we get it?" He had a sound system. And he said, "Right, we'll take it over. We'll organise it. We'll bring the sound system up, and we'll sort it." And so we did. I said to Tommy, the guy, the owner, and that was it. So it just all got a bit more. It would never have happened without Richard and his sound system. That's a big respect to Richard. The sound system was a big thing. It wouldn't have happened if we were still playing on the pub system. The fact that we made it a lot more professional. He brought up our own decks.
And what year was that? Speakers. What year was it?
Probably 2001, 2002, I think it was.
Okay, so I would have thought that it was before then in my mind. It's funny how the years all blend into one for some reason. It's not like they were messy weekends or anything. So that it would have all been the perfect storm. Southport was going great guns by then. You'd already mentioned about the forums, the online forums. So there's a lot of activity around about then as well. We got Dylan here talking about that. Paul was saying about how he'd met Danny says he first met you on the Fulham Palace Road where he first met you, and at the Cool Note sessions, and you were playing tune, doubled up on a tune that blew his mind. He'd said that earlier. So everything kind of came together, and you're starting to play. So tell us about the first big night that it happened, and what was going on in the pub.
It was just the Sands was always a good meeting point. Anyway, if we get on a Friday afternoon, there wasn't much going on anyway. There was a jukebox, and you heard the same 4 or 5 decent records that was on the jukebox, and that was it. So the potential was there, and it was all, everyone was still coming in, and it was a fantastic meeting point on a Friday afternoon. And I suppose once we took the sound system in, that was it. I suppose word sort of spread, because it was every 6 months, but word spread quite quickly. And also we knew a lot of people, and I suppose we was advertised on the Southport message board as probably a bit naughty anyway, as taking away the shine from the Southport Weekender. And on the Monday and a Tuesday, it just the Sands on the people saying on the message board, the Sands was brilliant. And it was like, some people were even saying, it's better than the Weekend. And we was like, oh no, get lynched.
Hence the title of the video.
I know,
because some people would say that, and of course you're spending when you're spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on lineups to bring all of these people to the north of England, and then some little upstarts. Not that yourself or Richard were upstarts by any stretch of the imagination. But it must have, I don't care what anyone says, it must have caused some heated words in the office, without a shadow of a doubt. Maybe no one would have ever said anything to you, but I guarantee those guys would have been cursing you under their breaths.
Yeah, probably. We was dealing with Dave Gardner anyway, and he was an absolute gentleman. He was fine about it. I'm sure. Probably under the skin, he wasn't very happy. They're bringing over all these DJs, so we just try to play it down a bit. And me and Richard talked a lot about the gig before we done it, and we said, well, the Southport's all about new music, so we've got good collections. Let's focus on what we can play. I mean, Richard, he had a fantastic modern soul collection. soul and into house and disco and stuff. And obviously my roots was jazz funk and the soul, some of the early hip hop and stuff like that. And that just all sort of blended in to what we wanted to play.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you before we carry on very briefly, have you got a light you can flick on before it gets too dark?
Do, mate.
I'm enjoying this. I hope you are as well, everyone. That's perfect now, mate.
I was thinking that myself, so I put the light on.
I was missing just admiring your records and your little black dots. So, and then it even got to the point where because there was downtime, infamously, wasn't there? The sessions would finish at Southport of an afternoon, and there'd be a little bit of a downtime, so then everyone back over to the pub. So the Saturdays were infamous, messy Saturdays.
Big time, yeah. We used to set up we used to get there about 5 o'clock on a Thursday. Once we started playing, we finished at probably 12, 1 o'clock. And then we were back in the pub at 11:30, getting set up, ready for opening at 12. And then we played right through till 9, 10 o'clock sometimes. But on the Friday, it was, everyone was coming in and meeting. And it's where we first met all the Dutch guys, Edgar, and all the tall guys. The guys from Barcelona was coming in because they had early flights. So they was getting to the site early. So they just come in. There's a Belgian crew. And then all our lot was turning up as well. People, travelling from all over.
I actually saw a video. I saw a video online the other day. I don't know if it was because I'd put the title on my page, and a video just came up in the feed, an old video of the Sands, and I didn't realise that Eddie had actually used to play back then. I'd completely forgot about that.
Yeah, he done a guest spot for us.
This was that time, and he was there with his brothers. Huge supporters. Yeah. My son is actually watching. Hi, Mikey. How are you, sir? How many would you say at the peak you had in the pub and sprawled out on the gardens outside as well?
Oh God,
because I can't think. Are we talking 500, 300 more?
Probably. I would have thought about 300. I think.
Mm-hmm.
Because you wouldn't get many in that long extension bit, and then you had the bit at one side of the bar, and then you had a bit round the corner as well. And that was probably it. Was there a lake at the back? Do I remember a lake? The sort of duck pond. It was a nature reserve.
Okay, I'm probably being generous by calling it a lake. And then, do I have a memory? And it was talked about online that even some of the headliners came over and span. Did Kerry play one time?
Kerry come over because I had to go. I was still married at the time, so I didn't want to push me luck, so I had to leave. But I left when it finished on a Sunday. So Richard said, "I'll ask around and see if anyone wants to play." And Billy Davison played one time, and Kerry Chandler came over and played as well. So that was the stuff of legend. It was so Kerry Chandler was my substitute.
Yeah, wicked. Well, that's a feather in the cap if ever there was one.
So that was fantastic days.
And in all the years, you never had, you were never pulled aside by Alex or Dave and said, "Come on now, lads, you're taking the piss."
No. Especially on a Thursday night, both Alex and Dave used to come over, and we was chatting to them and stuff. So, absolute gentlemen, the pair of them. So, wonderful.
How long did it continue for?
Until it finished at Pontins.
Okay.
So it was twice a year. It must have been about 5 or 6 years, I think it was, and then the last couple of years just went to the May, I think, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
What I remember. So it was probably done 2 or 3. It was just once a year, I think.
And until then, I don't think you'd actually got to play. Was that right? It was when it moved to Minehead. Then you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I can't.
You got.
Was there a little break?
There was about 4 or 5 years, I think.
Once it finished at Pontins, I'm not sure. Was there a little break of a couple of years and then it started at Minehead, or was it straight the year before?
No, I think it was about 4 years because I remember. Am I correct? Louis played the last set and he played "Don't Leave Me This Way." Was that at Southport?
That was at.
Or was that when
That
it
was at
finished?
Minehead.
That was when it finished completely at Minehead.
Right, yeah. If I remember right, it finished at Pontins, and then it moved the next year to Minehead, and I think there was 4 or 5 at Minehead, and then it shut.
And then they said, "That's it. We're not doing any more."
And that was it. Okay. And then it started up again. I think there was a second one just gone in March this year, so it started up. 20.
It's I'm making a complete muddle of all of this, and if this is the first interview that you're watching, I make no bones about it. I don't do any research. I just like to talk to my guests very naturally and just see what comes up. I could have all the facts in front of me here, but that would be that would be a bit too much work, to be honest. So
you've got a lot on your plate at the moment, getting ready for vocal booth.
Just a little bit. So in all of this time, aside from not yet getting to play at Southport, you have always been known, as I've said, as a music connoisseur. You know your music, a great collection. I know you travelled over to Barcelona and played over there with the Soulmates guys, right? And done a few other things.
Yeah, in 2001, I got the chance to go to New York to see. We'd met Carl Dupree from Future Soul Recordings through Billy Davison, and Carl just said, "Oh, if there's any time you're in New York, yeah, you come and play at my club." So that was it. We just got chatting, and so
was it in Jersey?
In New Jersey, yeah, the Loop Lounge in New Jersey. So we went over in March 2001. It was. So there was me, my pal Dean, his partner Laura, another girl, one of her friends, and so we went over on a Tuesday or something like that. And then another, unbeknown to me, another 3 or 4 come out as well. Richard came out, a couple of other pals came out as well. So that was just absolutely amazing. So ended up going to, we obviously wandered around New York during the day, went to Vinyl Mania and
Dance Tracks,
yeah. So I had, obviously, we was struggling with luggage. So we, how it all came out, we looked on teletext, so we managed to get a flight on Air India, this was. And it was a flight from, I think it was Bombay to Heathrow to New York. So we found out it was the people who get off at Bombay, the people who got off at Heathrow who didn't travel on to New York, they sold them flights off cheap. So we managed to get return flights for, I think it's about 160 quid or something like that, I think it was.
Right.
So that was all booked. I got the little bag of like 50 records, so 25 records. So I packed one, I packed another one, put that in my mate Dean's luggage as well, and off we went. So
Dan, I've just realised you're saying 2001. So what month was this?
Yeah. This was March.
Okay, so it was a good few months before the September. Obviously. Mark Randall is saying he's came out of the Sands in some states on a Friday afternoon. Danny, aka Frontback House, says it's a shame that you and Rich never got to play at Pontins. And Mark also reminds us that there was a Heritage Weekender for Southport as well. That was at a castle, was it? I think Camelot or something like that.
No, that was back They did do an all-day thing at Camelot in sort of near Preston, I think it was.
Okay,
but they did do another party back at the Pontins site in Southport.
Oh, right. Okay, again, missing. Good evening, Angel. Thank you for joining us. So you got to that, and so you say Carl Dupree, and I'm reminded, and I'm sure Mr. Blackwax will check this out at some point. The Deep House pages you would have been frequenting a fair bit. The forums.
Yeah, so putting my mixes up on there, and obviously Carl must have heard me. I think Billy was passing in my mixes as well, and he just said at any time you're in New York, just in passing, said you can play at my club. So that was it. We just arranged it. I'm going to get a chance to play in New York, so we just booked the flights and went.
How did it feel when you were there? Were you nervous at all, or? Slightly, I suppose.
it was all still vinyl at the time. Didn't have any CDs at the time. So we went to dance tracks that afternoon and bought another wad of records. And I was probably on for about 2.5 hours. It was a great little club, cracking little sound system, and probably played all the tracks I had. Mm-hmm. So that was unbelievable. So a fantastic experience. And then on the Saturday, a couple of friends said, right, we're going into New York, and we went up the World Trade Center. And it turned out it was 6 months and 1 day before 9/11. So it was March the 10th it was, 2001. So it's 6 months and 1 day before 9/11. And that night, me and Richard went to the shelter. So we got there at probably midnight and walked into the sound of Hugh Masekela, Don't Go Lose It Baby. And we walked out of there 8:30 in the morning, I think it was. Absolutely mind blown. It was Timmy Regisford all night, just absolutely mind blown. Mm-hmm. The music we heard and just the dancers, the whole experience. So we got back home we were staying in New Jersey, and everyone was sort of sitting up waiting for us. How was it? And it was just, we couldn't even talk. It was just that good. We was all going to Body and Soul that afternoon. So they all went off into New York, had a bit of a shop and a wander around. So right, we'll meet you in Club Vinyl for Body and Soul. We got there about 4:30, I think it was. And we come out of there about midnight, and it was probably the best clubbing weekend I've ever had. It was just absolutely mind-blowing. And it's funny, probably the biggest track of the weekend we heard was Phil Asher and Nathan Haynes' Earth is a Place. And it was an actual pleasure to speak to Phil a couple of years afterwards and tell him the story. I think Timmy Regisford played Earth is a Place 5 times throughout the night. And each time it got a bigger reaction, and it was just unbelievable. And then on the Sunday, we went to Body and Soul, and I think Earth is a Place got played 3 times. And Believe off the album, the original Broken Beat sort of mix of Believe got played twice, I think, that afternoon at Body and Soul. And it was like Phil Asher weekend in New York. It was just amazing. It was a real pleasure to tell him that story a couple of years later, and he couldn't believe it.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Phil. And you mentioned Timmy Regisford. Who would have been some of your heroes that you can immediately pick out as, heavily influencing you back in the day from the Americans and even from the UK?
Yeah, Froggy was the first one. Absolutely unbelievable deal. For mixing and the way he put stuff together. Obviously Chris Hill and people like Bob Jones, just for the music they played as well. American guys, obviously Louis Vega's just an absolute god. Tony Humphries, and yeah, our guys, I fully do all I can to support our guys. Neil Pearce, Sean McCabe, Groove Assassin. All our UK guys are holding the scene together. People like yourself and that. Fully support everything UK. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Always have done, always will do.
Okay, so then I think I did ask what would have been one of the highlights, apart from New York, in the UK in later years when you came back, that you would have got to spin out?
All the Southport Weekenders and that, just absolutely amazing.
So what was when you got the call up to play for the first time, how did that feel at Southport?
It was just unbelievable, yeah. It was sort of bittersweet as well, because he said, we haven't really got room for Richard. So I said, well, I'm going to have to speak to Richard first. And I had to phone Richard because he was going away to Miami that morning as well. So it was probably only a month or so before the event. So I quickly phoned him. He said, no, Paul, go and do it. He said, I think he wasn't going to go to the next Southport anyway. So he said, Paul, just go and do it. So I had his blessing and phoned Alex back, and he said, no, go and do it. I'm in. So that was just fantastic. Yeah, unbelievable. All through the Sands, it was just. Obviously, it wasn't part of the event, but to play records to our music to people who actually was so into it, and getting sort of plaudits from them and people coming up to her and asking what tune was, and then seeing all the thing on the message board later on, it was just totally mind blowing. It was just really real sort of confirmation of everything we've been doing is has been good and right. Mm-hmm. So that was a real big sort of fill up.
Brilliant. And everyone was there to support as well. I liken it to a footballer coming from an academy or the likes, who then makes it into the first team. That's exactly what it was like for you, right?
Yeah, I suppose I paid my dues. I suppose I've been around the scene. I've supported the scene, and bought the records, gone to the clubs, and supported DJs and that. And it's just to get my little turn is it's just fantastic. I'm just forever grateful just to be a part of it, and it's unbelievable to see my name on the same flyers as some of the Jill Scott and some of the big Chaka Khan and things like that, and then my little name at the bottom is just absolutely mind blowing. And
well, you should be very, very pleased that has happened, and so you know all the hard work that goes into these events, because now you're doing it yourself. So we need to talk about your radio show. We need to talk about your events, because at what point did you actually move from down south to up north?
Well, I moved up to Aberdeen in 2014. I did do some radio stuff down while I was still in Hemel. I was on Pressure for a little while, I think it was. Probably about 6 months, and there was another one I was on Back to Back FM or something like that. I was on, and I was putting out my mixes and podcasts and things. But yeah, I met Yvette at the Sands in 2009, just through. I think it was, Yvette was always in the back of the. I remember the programs. There used to be pictures of the last event, and Yvette was always in there. And I said to Dean one day, "Who's this girl? She's always in the programs." And now he said, "Oh, it's Yvette from Aberdeen." So I didn't know. I was obviously all through the 90s. I was married at the time. Early 2000s, that all sort of finished, and I think there was a picture of the Sands. There was Billy, Yvette, and one of her best pals, Morag, and Facebook had just started up. So everyone was starting putting names to faces and that. You ever see each other on the dance floors?
So what you're saying is you went stalking her?
No, I think I added Billy at the time, and then just added them as friends, and just got chatting through then. And I think Yvette said, "Oh, can you send me some tapes?" Or CDs at the time, and she had a big music collection. She loves her music, and obviously, and it just sort of grew from there. And then we actually met in the Sands, and just got chatting, and that was it. So
enough to draw you north of the wall, anyway.
Yeah, well, 5 years later, but it took our time, but we got there, and it's absolutely love it up here. It's great, fantastic,
beautiful.
Love life.
It's lovely to hear. So, how did you make the leap into sticking all of your hard-earned cash and the blood, sweat, and tears to becoming a promoter?
It's probably my age now, and I thought I haven't really done anything of mine. So the Sands was like it was a bonus thing to the Southport Weekender, basically. Played at lots of parties around and stuff, and I thought I just want to do something in mine. And obviously, moving up to Scotland, the soul stuff is well taken care of. There's lots of great soul DJs around, Bob Jeffries, and there's lots of good soul nights around. The disco stuff, the old Kent and things like that. There was nothing really happening for the soulful house sort of scene. Obviously, it got played by Bob and some of the guys when we went to their events, Sweet Soul and things like that. It got there was some house played, but it wasn't like I was going out in London. I was going to Bobby and Steve's nights and Neil's nights and in London, and I wasn't hearing what I wanted to hear when I was going to those nights. So I thought I'm going to try and do something. So I've been up to Glasgow a couple of times. Nick used to do a night called Elements of Soul in Glasgow with one of his pals. And that had finished a couple of years before I moved up. So he was the first guy I mentioned it to. I said, you fancy getting involved, trying to do something? And he said, I can't really at the moment. He was setting up a business at the time, so he didn't really have the time to spare to set up a night and stuff like that. So I said, just give me a shout when you're ready. So probably about a year or so later, he said, right, I'm ready. We can go back to the old venue he used to do his Elements of Soul in. So we've done a few years there. Wasn't that busy at all. It was a bit of a struggle trying to pull a crowd.
Why do you think that was?
Not really sure, to tell you the truth. There's a lot of big, a lot of people are still into the soul and disco stuff in Scotland as well. So I don't think they only ever go out and hear house when it's at Southport or something like that. So there's still a big crowd going to Southport and obviously Vocal Booth and places like that, but it's not into. I don't know whether they've been. I've been exposed to it more, I suppose. Going to the nights in London and the stuff like that, so we get exposed to it a bit more. So maybe they just haven't had that exposure, I suppose, outside of Southport or maybe Vocal Booth and places like that. So yeah, we struggled for the first couple of years. It was a free party anyway. We've done it for the love, and then we said let's try and sort of kick it up a gear. And we got brought the Journeymen up, and that was a big thing as well. So fair play to Ben and Miggs. That was a real big sort of kick up for us. Like it sort of moved us up a level, I think. Mm-hmm. And then just as we booked Neil for the next party later in, I think it was April 2020. Obviously COVID hit, and that was us shut down for a couple of years. So then we started playing a couple of little parties, and then so right, let's go for it. So we've had obviously we brought the Journeymen up, Neil Pearce as well.
So this is all at Basement 108.
Yeah, Basement 108. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So is that the new venue to where you had begun, or it's always been the same venue? It was just
no, we moved it along. We did get a bigger venue for originally when we brought the Journeymen up. We didn't fill it, but we had a very, very good crowd. So when we went back to stereo at the time, they said, well, we've got this other, our sister venue's a bit smaller. It'll be perfect for you. So we went out, or Nick went and had a look, and it is perfect for us. Mm. They have bands and stuff like that, and it's got a cracking little sound system. Holds just over sort of 110, 120. Perfect for us. Mm-hmm. And
you've had people making a decent trip as well from down south. I know you've had Birmingham, London, travelling up to come and see you. So doing well.
Oh yeah, big support from coming up from south, like London, Birmingham, and that. The second time Ben and Miggs come up, absolutely blew the roof off, and it was absolutely fantastic. And yeah, we've had Craig Smith, Groove Assassin. We lost a bit of money on it. It was in little did we know we booked it for the middle of May. Little did we know the Queen was going to die, and it was going to be an extra bank holiday and stuff like that. So on top of the extra bank holidays.
So inconsiderate, wasn't she?
I know, yeah. But, yeah, it was just one of them things. But we got the Journeymen coming up in the 23rd of September at the Flying Duck. So we've only got about 20 tickets to sell on that. So that's going to be a good one. And we've had one in Aberdeen. One of my old mates who used to play in Aberdeen with Billy D years ago, Austin Davison. He's come up to me and said, "Oh, fancy getting something going?" He wants to do something during the day. So we found a venue and we got something happening on the 30th of September. Just me and him playing from 3 p.m. till 9 p.m. Okay. Which is pretty perfect for our age group.
Our age group, our demographic. I know there's already a few all-dayers that go on up in Scotland, but it's just right. That's the weekend that many of us will be over here in Spain. And then I guess we should talk about the radio show as well that I know you'd love to do. I haven't actually caught it myself for a few months. So, there's so much content out there, but I've said to you on many occasions, once I got into the routine every week, I used to love listening to it. It's a great show. So tell us about that and your motivation to do that.
Yeah, so, I've been on Starpoint now for probably about 7 years. And now I alternate. It says every other Sunday lunchtime, alternate with Mark Randall. How you doing, Mark? And sort of when I was doing my old, just doing like a podcast and just sending it, putting it out on the internet, it was just like an hour of soul and mixed up with new stuff and some of the old soul I loved. Just sort of highlight some of my old collection. And same with the house stuff. And I always used to do a house mix in the second half, and I've carried that on at Starpoint. A lot of new music, a lot of new soul stuff. Always chuck in I'll do a touch of jazz, so I play an old jazz track or something that's new. Sort of regular features on there, and I always do a house mix as well, and sort of mix out with a lot of new music as well, which is my passion.
Well, for what it's worth, I don't think you've got a dull voice. I don't think you've got a monotonous tone. I think you present the show with authority, and you can hear the knowledge in everything that you're saying, and obviously the music speaks for itself, right?
Oh, that's very kind of you. Thank you, Andy. It's really appreciated.
Not at all. And then, Tenerife on the weekly, the annual pilgrimage to Tenerife, where we sat and chatted, and I said, someone needs to capture your story. Have you ever had the opportunity to get it documented like this before?
Not like one-to-one online on a YouTube. I did do a little, someone done a blog, Paul Marshall up in Leeds, he runs a blog, and he sort of done a little interview and that. So that was good to get stuff down like that. But yeah, really appreciate you asking me to do it, Andy. Really appreciate it.
Not at all.
So it's nice to tell the story.
It's great to hear the story, and I've loved how you were very specific with dates and years and, a photographic memory. And I say photographic memory, funnily enough, you did share some images and say, I've got these photos. And I said, let's just focus on the conversation. It's a good job I did, because if I'd have arranged all that, when one of my hard drives failed, I would have lost it all anyway. So it made sense. So to wrap up then, is there anything that we haven't spoken about that we should cover? I know in 90 minutes we've captured the tiny portion of your musical history, but it's definitely broken the ice, so to speak, for people to sit down over a beer and fill in all the gaps. Anything that you think about, you think, actually, I didn't mention this, or I forgot to give this a shot.
I've got plenty. There's lots of stories. I could mention my friend, one of my best friends, Lisa. She asked to mention the pigeon story. So if you got another 10 minutes or so, but
go on.
This was probably early 2000s. I used to DJ quite a lot for the Revolution bars in London. So I was DJing at Clapham. That finished at 1 o'clock. So then I arranged to meet some pals at the Ministry. So I was driving anyway. So I parked my car around the corner and see a few sort of shady characters around. So I put my jacket in the boot and had to come out of there about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. And the quarter light in the back was stoved in, and my jacket had gone out the back of my car. So I got back home, went to sleep, and then I was playing in Birmingham on the Sunday afternoon. I used to do a resident at the Pitcher and Piano on Brindley Place.
Yeah, of course.
It was part of the Cool Note nights that Steve Butler used to organise. So I played up there for 3.5, coming up for 4 years nearly. So I organised a glass replacement service in Birmingham, so I could drive up, get that done, and then go and do the gig. But just coming into Birmingham on the M6, probably outside lane of the motorway, doing about 80 mile an hour. Just coming up to, I think, the junction. Well, I'm not sure what the junction, you know better than me. You're on with the Aston Villa football ground. Junction 6 onto the Aston Expressway. So yeah, just flying up there, and I see this. You see, it was like Sunday afternoon. I saw this pigeon on the other side of the road, and I was trying to take off, and this car hit it, and I saw it just arc all the way around. I thought, that's going to hit me, and it just where the rear view mirror is, it hit that, and the glass went whoosh, like that. So I was like, oh. So I had to sort of scoot off the motor, got into the hard shoulder, and then. I phoned up the guy. I said, "You're never going to believe this." He said, "You got a windscreen as well." So he said, I think he come and got me, and then he just parked in front of me, and then I just followed him. It was only like a mile off the road anyway. So he done the glass replacement, done both the windscreen and the thing. So I went and done the gig, parked up the car in a Brindley Place car park, done the gig, come out of there. Load up all my records and stuff. Got to the barrier to put my car ticket in. Wound my window down and pressed it to come up. It got up and all we heard was this. So whether it's some glass got in the mechanism or something like that, but the glass, the window would only come up halfway. So back down the motorway, like wind and rain, and back down the M6. Like midnight, glass like the window up about halfway. I actually soaked my ear and all that side of my face was soaking wet and freezing cold. And that was a story Lisa wanted to tell me because she still chuckles about it now. It's just that's one of them things that can only happen to me.
It can only happen to you. You're running. Wow, listen, I'm sure that there are many other people who have got just as tragic stories with birds in Birmingham, but maybe not for a YouTube conversation. Well, mate, listen, thank you for giving me your time tonight. It has been great. I know we've only just scratched the surface. Everyone has been loving this. Jane says it's a great interview and she loved the Southport Weekend, reminiscing to be continued. And Danny, front back house, is still saying, thank you, Paul. You've introduced me to so much music, especially jazz, that I had never heard before, and he loves you for that.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you everyone for listening, and it's really appreciated. And thank you, Andy, for having me on.
It's my pleasure, mate. I'll press this button. I think everything's going to break now because, as I said, my computer's been fannying around. So cheers, brother. I appreciate your time.
Cheers,
Take
Andy.
care, man. Bye.
Catch you soon.
Right. Does this work now? Yes, it does. Okay. So, Mr. Paul Stuart, great, right? Interesting stories, and like all of them, we could have chatted about so many of the twists and turns. A sensationalist headline just to make people stop and think, nah, the Sands isn't better than Southport Weekender, but it was very, very important to a lot of people for a very long time. Next up, you can see we are talking to Mr. Danny Foster. That's going to be next week. It's a Wednesday night. The more eagle-eyed will be aware that I've changed the days. That's because I've got a little bit going on the other days of the week, specifically Monday. So watch out for when we go live. Most people check out the recording anyway, so that's all good. Thank you for your regular comments. Thank you for liking the video and subscribing to the channel. We have now hit over 1,500 subscribers. It does make a difference. It allows YouTube to show the video to more people in their stream, and you liking it will also show the video to more of your friends, because that's why we do this. We want as many people as possible to see these stories and let people know who was responsible for some of the biggest nights at and about Emily. Good evening. Better late than never. Make sure you check out the recording. Right. At this point, I would press my button to show you the final graphic, but I do know that it's not going to play. So I'm just going to end. Am I out of sync? I've been talking for an hour and a half and I'm out of sync.